Hey, welcome back. Or, if you're new here, welcome to a place where we talk about the things the Wasteland doesn't want you to understand. Today, we're diving into something everyone argues about, but few people really understand: power armor. Specifically, the most powerful model, the one that sits at the top of the hierarchy, the one that defines what these steel shells were always meant to become. But here's what nobody tells you. The answer isn't in the specifications, or the damage resistance, or the energy protection values. It's in what the armor costs, what it takes from the operators, what it does to everyone who thinks protection and power are the same thing. We're going to look at every major model, from the desperate first T-45 to the advanced Hellfire, and understand what each one says about the people who built it and the people who wear it. This is going to be dark. This is going to be uncomfortable. This is going to make you question whether power armor is salvation or just a different kind of prison. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. Let's talk about power armor. You want to know about power armor, the real story. Not the propaganda, not the Brotherhood's hymns about steel salvation, but what it actually meant when we strapped ourselves into these walking tombs and pretended we were gods among the ashes. I wore one once, before everything, before I understood what they really were. They call the T-45 the first. August 2065, Westtech started development, pushed by men in suits who realized too late that tanks cost too much and time was running out. The Chinese were already in Alaska, and the old ways of war were bleeding us dry, so they built something new, something desperate. 2 years later, in 2067, the first T-45 models hit the Alaskan front. I remember seeing the footage, classified then, but everyone saw it anyway. Soldiers moving through snow that would have buried them, carrying weapons that should have broken their backs, and the Chinese just stopped. For a moment, the whole war stopped. Not because we won, because they realized the rules had changed. The T-45 was crude. Westtech knew it. There was a weld point right below the chest plate that they never fixed, just left it there. A fault line in the armor that turned moderate caliber rounds into death sentences. My cousin died in Alaska wearing one. The official report said enemy fire. The truth was that Westtech had released a suit they knew would kill people because the alternative was losing the war faster. But here is the thing nobody tells you. The T-45 worked. It burned through energy cells like they were water, sure. Mobility was garbage in early models, but it gave American troops something they had not had in years: an edge. The Chinese started developing countermeasures, Gauss rifles that could punch through the plating, but by Cao's second, then it was too late. We had changed warfare forever. The suits weighed about 110 pounds, fully assembled, individual pieces anywhere from 15 to 20 pounds. You needed a special bodysuit underneath, the recon armor, just to interface with the servo motors. Without it, the T-45 was just an expensive coffin. The signal from the recon armor activated the power assist motors, let the hydraulics do the work your muscles could not. But that also meant more points of failure, more ways to die. I have seen T-45 suits in the Wasteland. Brotherhood patrols wear them like badges of honor. Raiders cobble them together from scrap. The NCR stripped the servo motors out entirely, turned them into heavy armor you carry on your back like a Brahmin. Chief Hanlon called it that once, carrying a Brahmin on your back, but it can take a lot of punishment. They were not wrong. You lose the power, you lose the mobility, but the plating still works, still stops bullets, still makes you feel invincible, right? Up until you realize you cannot move fast enough to matter. 10 years. That is how long it took Westtech to develop the T-51. A full decade of war, of learning what the T-45 could not do, of watching soldiers die in suits that almost worked. By 2069, Westtech was the largest defense contractor in America. The T-51 was their biggest contract, their chance to build something that was not a stopgap, something that was actually meant to win. They tested prototypes at Fort Strong in Massachusetts, starting in 2075. The early models had problems. Soldiers would tip over on hard landings. The gyroscopic stabilizers were not enough. They added shock absorbers, refined the hydraulics, ironed out the flaws that had killed so many T-45 operators. By June 2076, the first production run shipped to China. The T-51 changed everything. Again, polylaminate composite shell instead of steel, could absorb over 2,500 joules of kinetic energy without damage. The rounded profile helped deflect projectiles, but the real innovation was the coating. 10 microns of silver ablative layer that reflected laser blasts and radiation without touching the composite underneath. You could walk through a radioactive hellscape and come out clean. In theory, the back-mounted TX-28 microfusion pack generated 60,000 watts, enough to power the high-flow hydraulics, run the air filtration, keep you alive in contaminated environments. The suit even recycled urine into drinkable water. Disgusting, sure, but it meant you could stay in the armor for weeks. Become part of it. Stop being human and start being weapon. The Battle of Anchorage. That is where the T-51 made its debut. The winterized versions, painted pale blue to blend with snow, bearing army stars on the pauldrons and the flag below the fusion pack. They were instrumental. That is what the reports say. What they mean is that we could not have won without them. The casualties we avoided, the lives we saved, all because we had suits of armor that turned men into machines. But here is what they do not tell you in the propaganda. The T-51 had to be custom fitted to each operator, every suit tailored to the person wearing it. When it worked, when the fit was right, it felt like an extension of your body. When it did not, when the proportions were off or the calibration was wrong, it felt like being trapped in someone else's skin. You would fight the suit as much as the enemy. And the cost? My God, the cost. Each T-51 was so expensive, so difficult to manufacture, that they could never produce enough. Even at the end, even when we needed them most, there were never enough suits to go around. The T-45 kept serving because we could not afford to replace them all. That is why they made the T-60. After Anchorage fell, with the war supposedly won, West Tech went back to the drawing board. The T-51 was perfect, they said, the pinnacle of mechanized protection, but perfection does not matter if you cannot build enough of it. So they took the T-45 frame, the one they knew how to manufacture, and they upgraded it, refined it, made it something between a stopgap and a masterpiece. The T-60 entered service in 2077, mere months before the bombs dropped. It was designed to be cheaper than the T-51, easier to maintain, compatible with T-45 parts. Logistics over excellence. They could roll it out faster, equip more units, keep the war machine running. By October 23, 2077, T-60 suits were being deployed domestically, keeping order, enforcing martial law, putting down food riots, and crushing dissent in the streets of America. I have seen the footage, not the official channels, the underground stuff. Soldiers in T-60 armor facing down civilians, American citizens. The armor made them look less human, made it easier, I think. Easier to follow orders when you are encased in steel and cannot see the faces of the people you are hurting. The T-60 kept the same flaw as the T-45, that weld point below the chest plate. Cooper Howard, you might know the name, he wore T-45 inches Anchorage. He mentioned it once, how they knew about the defect, how soldiers kept dying because of it, how that same flaw carried over into the T-60 because changing it would have meant retooling the entire production line. But the T-60 was tougher, heavier armor plating, better drop tolerance. Brotherhood Knights could jump from a hovering vertibird, fall 50 meters, and walk away. The suit could take it. The operator might have their teeth rattled and their bones bruised, but the armor held. That was enough. People argue about whether the T-51 or T-60 was better. The Brotherhood on the East Coast uses T-60 as standard. The old chapters out west still swear by T-51. The truth is, they were built for different purposes. The T-51 was the best we could make. The T-60 was the best we could afford to make. One for quality, one for quantity, both necessary, both lethal. And then there was the X1, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Commissioned it right before the Great War. They knew what was coming. Everyone in power knew. They just did not know when. The X1 was meant for survival after the bombs, not battlefield dominance before them. A radically new approach to power armor design, abandoning the T-series philosophies entirely. The traditional pauldrons were gone. Instead, a hump that enclosed the operator's head, reducing the chance of enemy fire hitting vital areas. The helmet featured polarized eyepieces instead of a vision slit. Insect-like, alien, the sort of design that said we are no longer pretending to be human. Lightweight metal alloys, reinforced with ceramic castings, more protection in less space. The profile reduced without compromising defense. Everything about the X1 screamed next generation, everything except the fact that it barely existed. By late 2077, the X1 was technically functional, but it was burdened with severe design flaws, issues that prevented mass deployment. They made a handful of prototypes, a few test models. One suit went to Nuka-Cola Corporation for Project Cobalt. Presidential bodyguards got first dibs on the X1 EMK1. The rest stayed in the development phase. Blueprints and schematics locked in government facilities, waiting for a future that never came. The Enclave saved those schematics. Just before the bombs fell, they archived the X1 plans at Poseidon and White Springs facilities. When the world ended, when everyone else was dying in the nuclear fire, the Enclave was already thinking about what came next. They had the plans. They had the facilities. They had time. What do you think really happened here? The most advanced power armor design, the one meant to survive the apocalypse, and it just happens to end up in the hands of the people who wanted to control what came after. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I would like to know if I am the only one who feels this way. The Enclave restarted X1 development in 2198, over a century after the bombs. They had been working on power armor variations before that, trying to improve what they had, but nothing worked. Some prototypes were actually worse than the pre-war models. By 2215, under presidential order, they began serious work on upgrading power armor, testing prototypes, watching them fail, watching operators die in accidents and explosions they classified for morale purposes. October 2220, the Enclave developed what they called Advanced Power Armor Mark I, reliable, they said. The first true production model of post-war power armor, built from the X1 baseline but overcoming its flaws. Lighter composites, better servos, reinforced ceramic plates. The Mark I became standard issue for Enclave forces by 2241. Anyone who saw it knew what it meant. The Enclave was not pretending anymore. They were the remnants of the United States government, and they had the best armor in the Wasteland. That black and white color scheme, that insectoid helmet, it inspired fear. It was supposed to. By 2246, the Mark II was ready, even lighter, even tougher, optional Tesla upgrades for energy weapon defense, all ceramic composites, the sort of armor that said, "We have won and you cannot stop us." Production was limited at first, bottlenecked by the destruction of the oil rig in 2242. But once the Enclave established Raven Rock, they ramped up. The Mark II became their standard throughout the Capital Wasteland campaign. I have stood in front of Enclave soldiers wearing Mark II armor. You do not forget it. The way they move, faster than anything that heavy should be able to move. The way Los fire just bounces off the plating. The way they look at you like you are already dead and they are just filing the paperwork. The armor itself was a statement. America's second chance, they called it. The old world reborn in ceramic and steel. But it was not America. It was a ghost wearing America's skin. A corpse puppet animated by people who thought they had the right to decide who was human and who was not. The Enclave wasn't done. They never are. Even after the Brotherhood destroyed the oil rig, even after Raven Rock fell, they kept building, kept improving, because that's what the Enclave does. They iterate on dominance. Hellfire Armor. That was their masterpiece. Development started as a dedicated post-war research project. Early prototypes were finished by 2080, stored in Vault 51, where ZAX-13C was playing God with the residents. But the final design wasn't mass deployed until 2278, right when the Lone Wanderer was making waves in the capital Wasteland. The timing wasn't coincidence. The Enclave had analyzed every combat encounter, every failure of their previous armor designs. They canceled the Duraframe iBot project, pulled resources from other initiatives, and funneled everything into Hellfire. Dr. Whitley objected. He wanted to continue his work on autonomous iBots. The colonel ordered him to shut up and strip the Duraframe assets for Hellfire development. That's how important this project was. The exact material composition is classified. Even now, even after the Enclave's defeat, nobody outside their inner circle knows precisely what Hellfire Armor is made of. What we do know is that it utilized newly researched materials and superior construction techniques, not just refinements of existing tech. Something new. The armor lacked specialized systems seen in other suits. No fancy recycling, no cutting-edge power management. What it had was sheer resilience. A heavy, imposing frame designed for frontline combat where it could absorb punishment that would crack other armors. The Hellfire Trooper was meant to walk through hell itself and come out the other side still fighting. Fire resistance was built into the design. They paired it with flamethrowers, heavy incinerators that turned battlefields into crematoriums. Advanced respiration masks kept oxygen flowing even in burning environments. You could stand in the middle of an inferno, your weapons spewing more fire, and breathe normally. The suit would protect you, keep you alive, keep you killing. According to official Enclave documentation, Hellfire Armor was the most protective power armor ever developed. Better than T-51, better than Mark II, better than anything the Brotherhood had. The armor was a symbol of renewed military might, overwhelming force and intimidation wherever it appeared. Enclave Sigma Squad, the elite 6-person teams, their leaders wore Hellfire and carried heavy incinerators. When you saw that combination approaching, you knew death was coming dressed in black and red. But here's the thing about Hellfire. It came too late. By the time it was deployed in quantity, the Enclave's eastern operations were already collapsing. The Lone Wanderer and the Brotherhood were tearing through their forces. Adams Air Force Base fell. The mobile base crawler was destroyed. All that advanced armor, all that research. And it couldn't save them from their own hubris. Most Hellfire suits were lost with Adams Air Force Base. The few that survived became legends in their own right, walking symbols of what the Enclave used to be. Some Brotherhood chapters captured suits, studied them, tried to replicate the technology. They never succeeded. The materials were too specialized, the construction techniques too advanced. In Appalachia, the Hellfire prototype became a reward for nuclear winter survivors. In the capital Wasteland, only elite forces like the Devil's Hand had access. Everywhere else, it was a ghost story. The armor soldiers whispered about in bunkers when they thought their superiors weren't listening. Now let me tell you about armor that wasn't built for war at all. The Excavator Power Armor. Garahan Mining Company developed it before the Great War as a response to automation. Human miners were losing jobs to robots. Hornwright Industrial Mining was deploying autonomous mining machines that worked faster, longer, cheaper. Garahan needed something to level the field. They used Westech's power armor technology, licensed it for industrial purposes, and created the EX-17 excavator built for mining, for breaking rock and hauling ore, for giving human workers the strength to compete with machines. The yellow and black color scheme wasn't military, it was civilian. A hard hat made of steel. There was a competition. Garahan's human miners in excavator suits versus Hornwright's automated systems. The humans lost. Not because the excavator was inferior, because Hornwright cheated, rigged the competition. Garahan Mining went bankrupt shortly after. The excavator project died with the company. The suits sat in warehouses and mining facilities across Appalachia, incomplete, forgotten. When Vault 76 opened and the responders started rebuilding, they found the excavator plans, restored them, put them back into service, not for mining, for survival. Because in the Wasteland, extra carrying capacity and radiation protection matter more than firepower. I've worn excavator armor. It's not glamorous. The plating is industrial grade, functional rather than protective, but it gives you 100 pounds of extra carry weight. When you're scavenging ruins and every pound of salvage counts, that matters. When you need to haul supplies across irradiated zones, that matters. The excavator is proof that war wasn't the only thing power armor was good for. Then there's the T-65, Secret Service Power Armor, developed for the United States Secret Service before the Great War, but no full suits were ever completed before the bombs fell. The plans survived, though, locked in Vault 79 with the gold reserves and the Secret Service agents who guarded them. The T-65 used a different design philosophy than the T-Series. Instead of solid plates, it had segmented armor pieces, multiple smaller sections covering the chest and shoulders. This covered weak spots other suits left exposed, parts of the power armor frame that were usually vulnerable. The result was the highest physical protection of any power armor, pure defense at the cost of everything else. After the war, the Secret Service agents in Vault 79 began selling the schematics. Survivors in Appalachia could buy the plans with gold bullion, assuming they completed the right quests and earned the trust of the Foundation settlers or crater raiders. The T-65 became the endgame armor, the suit you worked toward when you had exhausted everything else. Statistically, it's the strongest. 565 ballistic resistance, 470 energy resistance, 470 radiation resistance. Numbers that make other armor look like paper, but obtaining it requires a grind that breaks most people. 6,900 gold bullion for cost people, the plans, more for the mods, weeks or months of daily operations and event completions. By the time you have a full modded T-65 set, you've put in more hours than most jobs require. Is it worth it? Depends on what you value, protection or sanity, perfection or pragmatism. The T-51 is more than enough for most Wasteland threats. The T-65 is for people who need to min-max, who can't stand the thought of anything less than optimal, who would rather grind bullion for months than accept that good enough is sometimes actually good. But you want to know what really defines power armor in the Wasteland? It's not the pre-war models or the Enclave's advanced designs. It's what people did with the scraps, Raider power armor. Junkyard engineering at its finest. Scavenged T-45 and T-51 parts welded to scrap metal and held together with desperation. These suits are makeshift, crude, significantly weaker than military-grade armor, but they give raiders who otherwise would have nothing the ability to punch above their weight. Blood Eagle variants, junkyard modifications, overboss custom jobs. Each gang puts their own stamp on salvaged armor, paint schemes that declare territory, modifications that prioritize intimidation over protection, spikes and blades and rust, the aesthetic of violence. A raider in power armor is still dangerous. The suit still stops most small arms fire, still gives them strength to wield heavy weapons, still makes them feel invincible enough to take risks they wouldn't take otherwise. The armor changes behavior, makes people aggressive, makes them think they can't lose. I've killed raiders in power armor. It's easier than you'd think. The suits are unreliable, joints fail mid-combat, fusion cores are often half-drained or scavenged from God knows where. The armor might protect the torso, but leave the limbs exposed. One good shot to the fusion core, and the whole suit powers down. Then they're just standing there, trapped in dead metal, waiting for the end. The Chinese had power armor too. Not many people know that. The People's Republic of China developed communist power armor based on captured American suits. They were years behind the US in terms of design and functionality. The armor served more as a status symbol for commissars than a practical battlefield equalizer. Very little is known about the internal systems or materials. The suits that survive the war are rare. Fallout 76 features some in Appalachia, evidence that at least a few made it to American soil before the bombs fell. Maybe from captured Chinese positions, maybe from espionage, maybe from the failed Chinese invasion. The lore doesn't say, and honestly, it doesn't matter. The Chinese lost the war. Their power armor is a footnote, a curiosity. More interesting are the post-war developments. The armor, built by survivors who never saw the old world. Union power armor, crafted by the Union in the pit, using leftover industrial materials. The pit, that irradiated hellhole of steel mills and slave labor, somehow produced functional combat armor. The Union resistance fighters needed something to stand against their oppressors, so they built it, using what they had, making it work through sheer necessity. The armor offers defenses comparable to pre-war models despite its post-apocalyptic origins. That's impressive. That's survivors taking the pieces of a dead world and forging them into something that can fight back. The design is practical, no nonsense. Engineering born from need rather than military contracts. Hellcat power armor, exclusive gear of the Hellcat Mercenary Company, used by mercenaries operating in the Pit and Appalachia, faction-specific, built for combat operations in hazardous environments. The Hellcat suit likely incorporates lessons learned from pre-war models and applies them in a more modular post-war context. If you've ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, tell me in the comments. I'll be reading them. It's sleek, threatening, the private military answer to traditional faction gear. Hellcat Company enforces their presence through superior armor. They're not Brotherhood, not Enclave, just professionals with the best equipment caps can buy. In the Wasteland, that makes them more dangerous than ideologues. They fight for profit, not principles. There's no reasoning with that. And then there's Vulcan power armor, the strangest story of all. It started as standard Enclave gear, X1 suits worn by Squad Epsilon to guard Project Vulcan, an ultrasight crystal research program. They were studying the crystals, trying to weaponize them, trying to understand the mutations they induced. Standard Enclave hubris, playing with forces they didn't understand. The scorched plague changed everything. As Squad Epsilon succumbed to the infection, their suits began fusing with ultrasight crystals. The armor's plating warped, became unstable. Jagged crystal growths spread across the surface like a disease made physical. The suits still functioned as armor, still protected, but they had become something else, something twisted. Vulcan armor is proof that the Enclave failed to contain the outbreak. It's corrupted power armor, a fusion of technology and infection. Each suit a walking monument to the Enclave's inability to control what they unleashed. You can find them in Fallout 76, scattered across Appalachia, warnings in steel and crystal. I wonder sometimes about the operators, the Enclave soldiers who felt the crystals start to grow inside their armor. Did they know what was happening? Did they try to get out? Or did the infection take them before they could react? The suits don't tell us. They just stand there, twisted and beautiful and horrifying. There are other variants I haven't mentioned. The NCR salvaged power armor, T-45 suits with servo motors, removed so regular infantry can use them. Carrying a Brahmin on your back, but it can take punishment. The ultrasight power armor developed by the Brotherhood's Appalachia chapter, using ultrasight composites instead of polylaminate. Stranger Heart power armor, a living mutation of ultrasight armor that offers incredible radiation protection at the cost of your humanity. Each variant tells a story about who built it, about what they valued, about how they thought power armor should work. The T-45 values speed over perfection. The T-51 values quality over cost. The T-60 values logistics over ideals. The X1 values survival over convention. The Enclave models value dominance over everything else. And in the Wasteland, 200 years after the bombs, all these suits still matter, still define conflicts, still determine who lives and who dies. The Brotherhood hoards them like holy relics, The Enclave remnants cling to them as proof of former glory. Raiders cobble them together from junk. Settlers restore them piece by piece. Everyone wants power armor because everyone understands what it represents. Invincibility, or at least the illusion of it. I've seen power armor save lives, watched soldiers walk through fire that should have killed them, witnessed attacks that would have been massacres, stopped cold by a single operator in the right suit. The armor works. That's not in question. But I've also seen what it does to people, how it changes them. When you can shrug off bullets and crush skulls with your bare hands, when you tower over everyone else and speak with a voice filtered through metal, you stop thinking of yourself as human. You become the armor, the weapon, the walking embodiment of violence. The Brotherhood understands this. Their entire culture is built around power armor. You're not a full member until you earn the right to wear it. Not a real knight until you've proven yourself worthy of the steel. They literally worship the technology, build their identity around being the keepers of power armor knowledge, and maybe that's appropriate. Maybe power armor should be treated with reverence, because it's not just technology, it's the crystallization of humanity's drive to make war more efficient, more survivable, more total. Every innovation, from the T-45's crude servo motors to the Hellfire's advanced materials, represents thousands of hours of research aimed at a single goal, making it easier to kill without dying: the fusion core. That's what it all comes down to in the end. Every suit, every variant, every technological marvel or junker modification needs power. The TX-28 microfusion pack, generating 60,000 watts, supposed to last for 1,000 years under optimal conditions. Supposed to. In reality, fusion cores drain fast. Combat usage, servo motor strain, environmental factors, all of it eats through the charge. Pre-war, they had manufacturing facilities cranking out fusion cores by the thousands, supply chains that kept military units equipped. Now, you scavenge them from generators and rusted-out facilities. You ration them like ammunition. You watch the charge meter drop and do the math on whether you can afford another firefight. I've seen operators abandon perfectly functional armor because they couldn't find fusion cores. Suits worth thousands of caps, standing empty in the wasteland because the power ran out and there was no way to recharge them. That's the reality nobody mentions in the propaganda. All the advanced materials and superior engineering in the world don't matter if you can't keep the suit powered. The Brotherhood has fusion core production, limited but functional. That's one of their biggest advantages. They can actually maintain their fleet of power armor suits, keep them running. The Enclave had the same capability before their facilities were destroyed. Everyone else is scavenging, making do, hoping they find another core before the current one dies. Some operators get creative. They pull cores from suits they're not using. They trade for them at exorbitant prices. They learn where the old military checkpoints were, the places most likely to have backup generators still running. They become experts at squeezing every last watt from a failing core. It's not glamorous, it's survival. And that's what power armor really is in the Wasteland. Not invincibility, not dominance, just another tool for survival that happens to be incredibly resource intensive. Think about the logistics. Each suit requires regular maintenance. The servo motors need lubrication. The hydraulics need to be bled and refilled. The plating needs to be inspected for cracks and stress fractures. The power systems need to be calibrated. The helmet's air filtration needs new filters. The vision systems need cleaning. On and on and on. Pre-war, military units had dedicated technicians, power armor maintenance specialists, who did nothing but keep the suits functional. Post-war, you're lucky if you know which end of a wrench to hold. Most Wastelanders don't have the expertise to properly maintain power armor. They wear it until something breaks, then either figure out how to jury-rig a repair or abandon the suit entirely. The Brotherhood trains people for this. Power armor maintenance is part of their curriculum. You learn to disassemble and reassemble every component. You learn to diagnose problems by sound and feel. You learn to fabricate replacement parts when originals aren't available. It takes years. That's why Brotherhood power armor stays functional while everyone else's falls apart. The Atom Cats in the Commonwealth, they figured it out too. Took over an old Red Rocket station, turned it into a power armor garage. They customize suits, paint them in hot rod colors, keep them running through pure enthusiasm and mechanical skill. They're not military, they're just people who love power armor and learned how to maintain it. That's rarer than you'd think. Most faction leaders don't understand the maintenance burden. They see power armor as force multiplication. They acquire suits and send troops into battle without considering long-term upkeep. 6 months later, half the suits are inoperable. Another 6 months, they're all stripped for parts. That's how Raider power armor happens. Desperation and lack of expertise producing functional garbage. The excavator suits have an advantage here. Industrial equipment is built to be maintained by regular people. The design is more modular, more accessible. You don't need specialized training to replace an excavator's hydraulic line. The civilian origins make it easier to keep running with Wasteland resources. That's why Vault 76 dwellers could restore them. The barrier to entry was lower. Military power armor, especially the advanced models, requires knowledge that mostly died with the old world. The schematics exist, scattered across military installations and corporate facilities, but understanding them is another matter. Reading a technical manual doesn't make you a trained technician. Actually working on the armor, making mistakes, learning from them, that's how expertise develops. And then there's combat damage. Power armor protects you, but it's not indestructible. Heavy weapons fire dense plating. Explosions crack seals. Plasma weapons melt through ablative coatings. Melee attacks from super mutants deform the frame. Every hit the armor absorbs is damage that needs to be repaired later. Some damage is cosmetic, scratched paint, dented panels, visual evidence of combat that doesn't affect functionality. Other damage is critical, a cracked fusion core housing, a severed hydraulic line, a compromised air seal. The difference between walking away from a fight and dying in your armor. I knew an operator once who took a missile to the chest. His T-60 torso piece absorbed most of the blast, saved his life, but the impact compressed the frame inward, crushed his ribs even through the padding. He survived, but he never wore power armor again, said he could still feel the metal pressing down on him. The armor had protected him and hurt him at the same time. That's the paradox of power armor. It's simultaneously protection and prison. You're safer inside it, but also trapped, dependent on fusion cores, on maintenance, on the technology continuing to work. If something goes wrong while you're sealed inside, you're in trouble. If the power dies mid-combat, you're immobilized. If the air filtration fails in a contaminated zone, you suffocate in your protective shell. The T-65 segmented design was supposed to address some of these issues. More coverage meant fewer vulnerable points, but more armor pieces also meant more potential failure points. More seals to maintain, more joints to lubricate. The protection came with complexity. Nothing is ever simple. Let me tell you about the operators, the people who actually wear these suits, because power armor doesn't make you superhuman. It amplifies what you already are. Put a coward in power armor, and you get a coward with better protection who runs away faster. Put a psychopath in power armor, and you get a walking nightmare that can act on every violent impulse without consequences. The Brotherhood screens for this. Their training isn't just technical. They're evaluating psychology, making sure the people they give power armor to won't abuse it, won't become monsters inside the steel. It doesn't always work. You still get Brotherhood deserters who keep their armor, paladins who go rogue, knights who decide the rules don't apply to them anymore. The Enclave didn't care about psychology. They cared about loyalty, about following orders. If you were loyal to the Enclave's vision of humanity, you got the armor. What you did with it, as long as it served Enclave interests, was your business. That's how you end up with Hellfire troopers burning settlements, with Mark II operators executing Wastelanders for failing genetic purity tests. The armor didn't make them monsters. It just made them more efficient monsters. Raiders in power armor are the worst. They don't have screening, don't have training, don't have discipline. They have salvaged suits and fusion cores and a complete lack of restraint. Raider power armor operators are force without purpose, violence without strategy. They're dangerous until they're not. Until the armor fails or someone exploits their lack of training, I've fought Raider power armor operators. You target the fusion core, always. One good shot and the entire suit powers down. Or you target the joints, the places where armor segments meet. Raider modifications are sloppy. They leave gaps, weak points, or you just avoid them entirely. Let them burn through their fusion core chasing you. Wait until they're out of power and vulnerable. Professional operators, Brotherhood or Enclave or Hellcat Company, they're different. They know their armor's capabilities and limitations. They know how to use cover, even in power armor. They know when to advance and when to retreat. The armor amplifies their training, makes them genuinely dangerous instead of just loud. The psychological impact matters too. Seeing power armor approaching does something to people. Triggers deep survival instincts. You know you're outmatched. Know your weapons probably won't penetrate the plating. Know that the operator inside can kill you with minimal effort. Some people freeze, some run, some fight anyway out of desperation or stupidity. The armor changes how people see you, even your allies. You stop being a person and start being an asset. A mobile weapon platform, orders start assuming your invulnerability. Command sends you into situations that would be suicide without the armor. You become expendable in a different way. Your life matters less than the suit you're wearing. That's why some operators refuse to exit their armor. They stay inside for days, weeks, sleeping in the suits, eating and drinking through tubes, handling bodily functions through the recycling systems. They become dependent on the protection, afraid of being vulnerable again. The armor stops being equipment and becomes identity. The Brotherhood recognizes this as a problem. They mandate time outside of power armor, regular rotation. They want operators to remember they're human, to maintain connections outside the steel. It doesn't always work. You still get knights who spend every possible moment in armor, who feel naked and defenseless without it. The Enclave didn't care about this either. If an operator wanted to live in their armor, fine, made them more mission ready, made them less likely to hesitate, made them perfect soldiers who had forgotten how to be anything else. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the Wasteland, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. The paint jobs tell stories too. Brotherhood paint schemes indicate rank and chapter, paladin colors, knight insignia, initiate markings. You can read an operator's place in the hierarchy by looking at their armor, its military structure made visible. Everyone knows where they stand. Enclave armor was uniform, black and white. No variations except for specialized units like Hellfire. The uniformity was intentional, made them look like a unified force, an army rather than individuals. The psychological warfare of identical killers in identical armor. Raiders paint their armor with blood and rust, trophies and warnings, symbols of what they've done and what they'll do. Every paint job is a threat, a promise of violence. They want you to see them coming and despair. The Atom Cat's hot rod paint schemes are rebellion, refusal to let the Wasteland make everything grim. They take military hardware and make it beautiful, make it art, flames and pinstripes, and chrome, power armor as self-expression rather than intimidation. Each approach reflects philosophy. The Brotherhood sees armor as sacred duty. The Enclave sees it as military equipment. Raiders see it as intimidation. The Atom Cats see it as extension of self. Same technology, completely different meanings. Materials matter too. The T-45's steel plating is easy to work with, but heavy. The T-51's polylaminate composite is superior, but difficult to manufacture. The X1's lightweight metal alloys with ceramic castings require advanced facilities. The Enclave's advanced armor materials remain classified. Each choice represents trade-offs between protection, weight, manufacturability, and cost. Pre-war, the military could afford to prioritize protection over cost. The T-51 cost millions per suit. They built them anyway because losing the war cost more. Post-war, economics work differently. You use what you can find, repair what you can maintain, trade for what you can't make. The advanced materials of Hellfire armor are useless if you can't replicate them. That's why T-45 and T-51 remain common. The materials are relatively accessible. The designs are well documented. Someone with the right skills and resources can repair them, keep them functional. The more advanced suits, X1 and beyond, require infrastructure that mostly doesn't exist anymore. You find them, you use them, but when they break, they're done. The Brotherhood's technical advantage comes from preserved knowledge. They have pre-war technical manuals, trained technicians who learned from trained technicians, facilities with the right tools. That's worth more than raw materials. Knowledge and expertise matter more in the Wasteland than ore and metal. The Institute had that advantage too. They built their own X1 modifications, despite lacking the original schematics, developed new coding materials that enhanced intelligence. They didn't need the plans because they understood the principles. That's the difference between copying and innovating. The Institute could innovate. Most Wastelanders can only copy. And then there are the legends, the unique suits that show up in stories told around campfires. Maxon's custom T-60 with Elder paint scheme, Dance's Brotherhood Paladin personal armor, the winterized T-51 from Operation Anchorage simulation, the Quantum X1 with Nuka-Cola branding. Each suit famous not just for protection, but for who wore it, for what they did while wearing it. Power armor becomes mythology. The stories we tell about it transcend the actual specifications. It doesn't matter if the T-51 has 433 ballistic resistance or if the T-65 has 565. What matters is what the armor represents: human ingenuity, refusal to accept vulnerability, the drive to build better weapons wrapped in better protection. Every suit is a monument to that drive. From the crude T-45 to the advanced Hellfire, each represents thousands of person-hours of engineering, testing, refinement. People spent careers developing these suits, died in accidents trying to perfect them, sacrificed ethics and morality to push the technology further. And now, in the Wasteland, we use the fruits of their labor. We fight in armor designed by people who died 200 years ago. We depend on technology we barely understand. We paint it, modify it, personalize it, make it ours. But it's not really ours. It's borrowed, stolen from the past. The most powerful power armor model, that's what you wanted to know. But there's no simple answer. Most powerful in what context? For what purpose? Under what conditions? The T-65 has the highest raw defensive statistics. The Hellfire has superior materials and construction. The X1 represents the most advanced pre-war technology. The Hellcat has ballistic damage reduction that outperforms higher-rated suits. Each excels in different ways. Each has different strengths. But if I had to choose, if I absolutely had to pick one suit as the most powerful, I'd say it depends on the operator. A skilled operator in T-51 beats an amateur in T-65. Training and experience matter more than specifications. The most powerful power armor is the one you know how to use, the one you can maintain, the one you have fusion cores for. That's the truth they don't want you to hear. The answer isn't in the armor, it's in you. I need to tell you something I've been avoiding, something about what power armor actually costs. Not in caps or bullion, in humanity. There was a soldier at Adams Air Force Base, Enclave. I never learned his name. He'd been wearing Hellfire armor for 16 straight days when I saw him. 16 days inside the suit, operating continuously, eating through feeding tubes, and trusting the recycling systems to handle everything else. His eyes had this look, distant, like he was seeing through walls that weren't there. He told me he couldn't remember what his own skin felt like anymore. Said the armor had become more real than his body. When he closed his eyes, he didn't see darkness. He saw the helmet's HUD, target acquisition overlays, threat assessment markers. The interface had burned itself into his brain. 2 days later, he refused to exit the armor for mandatory maintenance, said he'd die if they opened it, that his body couldn't exist outside the steel anymore. They sedated him, cut the armor open. He was right, in a way. The person who went into that Hellfire suit 16 days earlier was gone. What came out was something else, something broken. That's what power armor does when you let it. It replaces you, piece by piece, day by day, until you're not wearing the armor anymore. The armor is wearing you. The T-45 operators in Alaska, the first ones, they didn't know this yet. They thought they were wearing advanced equipment. They didn't realize they were pioneering a new form of warfare that would blur the line between soldier and weapon, between human and machine. They were the test subjects for a transformation nobody had planned. Every advancement made it worse. The T-51's custom fitting meant the armor conformed to you became an extension of your body. The X-1's integrated systems meant you depended on it for survival. The Enclave's advanced models meant you could stay inside indefinitely. Each improvement in technology was a step toward obsolescence of the operator. The Brotherhood understands this, I think. Their rituals around power armor, the reverence, the mandatory rotation, it's all designed to prevent this dissolution of self. They make you earn the armor, make you prove you're worthy, make you remember that you're a knight who wears armor, not armor that happens to contain a knight. The distinction matters. But even the Brotherhood has operators who lose themselves, who start thinking in tactical overlays and threat assessments, who stop seeing people and start seeing targets, hostiles, civilians, assets. The armor's interface encourages this, reduces complexity to labels and colors, makes killing a matter of eliminating red markers from your HUD. I wonder what the Chinese operators felt, the ones wearing communist power armor, knowing it was inferior, knowing the American T-51 operators they faced had better protection, better systems, better chances. Did they feel expendable? Did they understand they were propaganda in steel? Status, symbols for commissars who wanted to look powerful without actually risking anything? The NCR salvaged armor tells a different story. By removing the servo motors, by turning power armor into heavy armor, they stripped away the transformation. You can't forget you're human when you're carrying the weight on your own muscles. When every step reminds you of the burden, the NCR chose exhaustion over transcendence. Maybe they were smarter than the rest of us. Raider power armor operators are tragic in their own way. They put on these junker suits, thinking they've found power, thinking they're now the predator instead of prey. But they don't have the training, don't have the support systems, don't have anyone to remind them who they were before the armor, so they become caricatures, walking nightmares that last until their fusion core dies or someone shoots them in a critical joint. The armor accelerates moral decay in people already inclined toward violence, makes cruelty easier, makes consequences distant. When you can crush a person's skull with your bare hand, when you can shrug off their attempts to fight back, when you're literally looking down on everyone from inside your steel shell, empathy becomes optional. Raiders already had limited empathy. The armor removes what little remained. Union power armor is different. Built by resistance fighters in the pit, crafted from industrial materials by people fighting for freedom, it carries different weight. The operators didn't lose themselves because they never had the luxury. They were always aware of their vulnerability, always knew the armor was a tool, not an identity, always had to return to being human because other humans were depending on them. That's the pattern. Power armor consumes people who have nothing else, who see the suit as salvation rather than equipment. Brotherhood Knights maintain identity through culture and duty. Enclave soldiers maintain identity through ideology and mission. But give power armor to someone with nothing to hold on to, and they vanish into the steel. The Hellcat mercenaries understand this on some level. They're professional. The armor is a business asset. They maintain separation between operator and equipment because their livelihood depends on it. You can't be an effective mercenary if you're psychologically fused with your gear. You need to negotiate, to interact, to switch contexts. The armor is for combat. Everything else requires being human. Vulcan armor operators never had a choice. The ultrasight crystals fused with their suits, and by extension, with them. The scorched plague didn't ask permission. It just transformed. Operator and armor and infection becoming one thing. A walking monument to Enclave hubris. They wanted to weaponize the crystals. Instead, the crystals weaponized them. I've been circling around something, the real answer to which power armor is most powerful. And it's not about defensive ratings or material composition or technological advancement. The most powerful power armor is the one that doesn't consume the operator. The T-51 is powerful because it can be worn and removed, because operators can maintain their humanity while using it, because it amplifies capability without replacing identity. The design is old now, generations old, but it understood something the later models forgot. The armor serves the operator, not the other way around. The T-65 offers maximum protection, but demands maximum investment. The grind to obtain it, the resources to maintain it, the specialization required to use it effectively. It's powerful, yes, but it's also consuming. It takes over your gameplay, your priorities, your goals. Even in a meta sense, the armor begins to define you. The excavator is powerful because it remembers its civilian origins, because it gives you carrying capacity and radiation protection without pretending to make you invincible, because you wear it for practical reasons, not psychological ones. It's honest about what it is, a tool, nothing more. Hellfire is powerful and terrifying for the same reason. It's optimized for killing, built from the ground up to destroy. There's no pretense of versatility or civilian application. It's a weapon that happens to protect the person using it. The honesty is horrifying, but at least it's honest. The pre-war designers didn't think about any of this. They thought about armor values and servo motor efficiency and power consumption. They ran simulations and built prototypes and tested variants. They optimized for battlefield survival without considering what survival in that context would do to the operator. Westech built the T, 45 inches a hurry, built the T-51 with care. Both times, they focused on the technology, on making the suit work, on giving American soldiers an advantage. They succeeded. The armor worked. It just also changed the soldiers wearing it in ways nobody had predicted. The X-1 development, commissioned by the Joint Chiefs, was at least honest about its purpose. Survival after the bombs. They knew the world was ending. They designed armor for the aftermath, for a future where radiation and violence would be constant, where operators would need to live inside their suits for extended periods. They designed for the transformation because they knew it was inevitable. The Enclave took that design and perfected it, made the transformation complete. Advanced power armor. Mark I and II weren't just protection, they were a statement about what humanity would become, what the Enclave thought it should become: steel-clad, genetically pure, merciless. The armor reflected the ideology, or maybe the ideology reflected what the armor did to people. Cause and effect blur. And now, 200 years later, we're still using these suits, still climbing into steel shells designed for a war that ended in nuclear fire. Still thinking they'll protect us. They do, physically, but psychologically, spiritually, they're still weapons, still designed to transform operators into killers. The most powerful power armor model is the one you can walk away from, the one that doesn't follow you into your dreams, the one that stays equipment instead of becoming identity. By that measure, probably the T-51, maybe the excavator, definitely not the Hellfire, definitely not the advanced Enclave models. But that's not really what you wanted to know, is it? You wanted specifications. You wanted me to tell you the T-65 has the highest damage resistance, or the Hellfire has the best materials, or the X-1 represents the pinnacle of pre-war engineering. And all of that is true. The numbers don't lie. What the numbers don't show is the cost. The fusion cores are the least of it. The real cost is measured in humanity, in the distance between who you were and who you become, in the moment when you realize you've stopped thinking of people as people and started thinking of them as targets or obstacles or NPCs in your personal war game. Power armor enables atrocities, not because it's evil, because it's efficient, because it removes consequences, because it makes violence easy and survival easier, because it lets you do things you couldn't do otherwise and insulates you from the immediate results. The armor doesn't make you a monster, it just makes being a monster practical. The Brotherhood tries to prevent this with honor codes and training and culture. The Enclave didn't care because monsters were the goal. Raiders become monsters because they have nothing else. Settlers and survivors sometimes become monsters because the Wasteland doesn't leave room for anything else, and the armor facilitates all of it. Loyalist and revolutionary, hero and villain. Everyone who puts on power armor becomes more effective at whatever they were already doing. If you were protecting people, you protect them better. If you were hurting people, you hurt them worse. The armor is a multiplier. It amplifies. It doesn't discriminate. That's the real power of power armor, not protection, amplification. And amplification of human capability inevitably amplifies human darkness, because capability without constraint becomes cruelty. I've worn power armor. I know what it feels like. The strength, the protection, the sense of invulnerability. I also know what it costs, the way it changes how you see the world, how it makes violence the first solution instead of the last resort, how it makes you forget that the people you're fighting are people. I stopped wearing it, not because I couldn't maintain it, not because I lacked fusion cores, because I could feel it changing me, could feel myself starting to think in overlays and threat assessments, could feel my empathy eroding under layers of steel. So I stopped, went back to regular armor, went back to being vulnerable. Some people can wear power armor and maintain themselves. The best Brotherhood paladins do it. Some Hellcat mercenaries manage it. A few remarkable Wastelanders keep their humanity intact inside the steel, but they're rare, and they're constantly fighting the erosion, constantly reminding themselves that the armor is equipment, that they're still human underneath. Most people can't do that. Most people who get power armor eventually become the armor. Their personality gets compressed down to whatever fits inside the tactical interface. Everything else gets trimmed away as unnecessary. They become efficient, effective, empty. So when you ask me which power armor model is most powerful, I have to ask, powerful at what? Killing, the Hellfire, surviving, the T-65, maintaining humanity? Probably none of them. Maybe the excavator, because it never pretends to be more than a tool. The real power in the Wasteland doesn't come from armor. It comes from being someone worth protecting, from having something to fight for beyond survival, from maintaining connection to other people even when technology would let you transcend those connections. The armor can keep you alive. It can't give you a reason to stay alive. That's what I've learned. That's what 2 centuries of power armor development, from the desperate T-45 to the advanced Hellfire, ultimately teaches. We build better and better shells to protect ourselves. We forgot that the self-worth protecting isn't the body, it's everything the armor strips away. The vulnerability, the empathy, the humanity. The most powerful power armor is the one you don't need, the one you could use but choose not to, the one you keep as option rather than identity. Because once you need it, once you can't imagine existing without it, you've already lost what it was supposed to protect. That soldier at Adams Air Force Base, the one who couldn't leave his Hellfire armor. He survived the war, survived the Brotherhood assault, survived everything the Wasteland threw at him, but he didn't survive the armor. None of us really do. We just wear it until it's done wearing us. And that's the truth about power armor. All the models, all the variants, all the technological marvels, and desperate improvisations, they protect your body while consuming your soul. They keep you alive while killing who you were. They're the most powerful and most dangerous technology in the Wasteland, not because they might fail, because they always work exactly as designed.